Hey, I'm Jake, and today on the Steaming Pile, we're talking about Wolverine and his connection to Japan, aka the land of the rising sun and used panty machines. Now, I'm going to assume that everyone who's watching this video has at least a passing knowledge of Wolverine from either the movies, the cartoons, or dare I dream it, the comic books. Now, what many of you may not know is that Wolverine has a long and storied history with Japan. This history includes fighting the Yakuza, ninjas, and getting laid more than a set of tentacles in a hentai. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So let's start with Wolverine's first trip to Japan. Or more specifically, the first time he met his first sensei, Ogun. Wolverine first met Ogun in Shanghai, China, while it was under Japanese rule. This was between the years 1937 and 1945. Yes, Wolverine is old as shit. But that's beside the point. Wolverine, or Logan, who we'll refer to him as from time to time, Wolverine met Logan while he was working as a traveling sailor. Now, Ogun saw the potential in Wolverine and offered to train him in various martial arts and swordsmanship, or more specifically, the katana. Wolverine at first declined, but would years later take Ogun up on his offer to be trained. So, Wolverine travels to Japan, trains under Ogun, masters the katana and various forms of martial arts, until decades later, Wolverine would have to kill his former master or sensei, as he had strayed from the path of honor. Now, this was during his time with the X-Men. Ogun had gotten involved with organized crime, mainly the Yakuza, and during one storyline had brainwashed the young X-Men Kitty Pryde, or Shadowcat, for his own nefarious ends, and Wolverine, as a result, would be forced to kill his former master. Now, that didn't stop Ogun from returning from the dead, like Jason returning to Camp Crystal Lake to kill a multitude of campers periodically. No, he would come back as a disembodied spirit that Wolverine would have to deal with from time to time. Methods of his future defeats included having to destroy his enchanted masks, or making sure he did not have any hosts to bounce around and possess, because Ogun, it was later revealed, could telepathically possess people from beyond the grave. But let's go back to before Wolverine had to murder Ogun. After he finished up training under Ogun for the first time, so we're back in the 40s. Wolverine would leave Japan, go on a series of adventures outside of Japan, but that would eventually lead him to fighting in World War II. Again, Wolverine, older than dirt. Wolverine would fight on the side of the Allies, going on several adventures, even teaming up with Captain America on occasion. However, toward the end of the war, Wolverine would be captured and imprisoned in a Japanese POW camp. Wolverine would escape the camp using his knowledge of Japan with an American soldier. Upon escaping, he and the soldier meet a woman named Atsuko. The American soldier, wanting to cover the tracks, wants to murder Atsuko. Wolverine refuses this and forces the soldier to part ways with him. Wolverine and Atsuko have a short-lived one-night romance, and the very next day, Atsuko is murdered by the soldier who wanted to kill her in the first place. Wolverine and the soldier have a fight, and during the ensuing fight, as Wolverine is trying to avenge Atsuko, the Americans drop the bomb on Hiroshima, and Wolverine is caught in the blast. Wolverine survives this because he's a badass, and has ridiculous healing powers. But for the full story on that, check out the 2008 Marvel Knights miniseries, Logan. Moving on, let's discuss Wolverine's post-World War II history with Japan. He returns to Japan, and at the behest of Ogun, who he, again, has not murdered yet, he is told he should seek out Master Bando Saburo in Itsu Falls. Wolverine does this. Saburo tells Wolverine that he will train him only after he builds a house with his own two hands. Wolverine does this. This is all sort of a test to get Wolverine. It's a constant theme in Wolverine comics that he lets his animal nature get the better of him, which is why martial arts is very appealing to Wolverine. It helps him soothe the savage beast within. Now, during his training in Jasmine Falls under Master Saburo, Logan falls in love with a woman named Itsu. The two are soon married, and they live an idyllic life for a very short time. Eventually, Itsu reveals to Logan that she is pregnant. Logan, being very happy at this news, decides he wants to celebrate, and the town obliges. The town initiates a combat ceremony to see if Wolverine is ready for fatherhood. Probably a tradition we should institute in America. Now, Wolverine has to fight several combatants unarmed. They themselves are unarmed, but he eventually succumbs to his animal instincts, accidentally unsheathes his claws, and kills one of the combatants by stabbing him. Wolverine fails the test, falls into a depression, is sad, dejected, and goes back home to see Itsu. He finds Itsu has been murdered. It is later revealed, but unbeknownst to Wolverine at the time, that the murderer is the Winter Soldier. It's complicated, read the series. Wolverine then leaves Jasmine Falls and seeks out the ancient mystical swordsmith Muramasa. Muramasa then crafts Wolverine a blade called the Muramasa Blade. A blade that is so strong and so powerful, due to the fact that he's used part of Wolverine's soul and the embodiment of his rage, that it can kill immortals and even negate Wolverine and other mutants' healing abilities. So this sword can even kill Wolverine. Now, these events had a lasting impact on Wolverine's life. He thought that his unborn child had perished with Itsu. He had not. This would later become the villain, Daken. Daken would be taken covertly to be fostered by a married couple in Sendai, Japan, whose names were Akihira and Natsumi. But this isn't about Daken. For more on him, Jasmine Falls, Itsu, the Muramasa Blade, and Master Bando, check out the series Wolverine Origins, not to be confused with Wolverine Origin 1 or Wolverine Origin 2. Now we're going to skip ahead several decades to Wolverine's time in the X-Men. At this point, Wolverine had lost much of his memories due to his involvement with the Weapon X program. Yes, before this, Wolverine, anytime he had unsheathed his claws, these would have been bone claws. The Weapon X program would graft the metal that we know as adamantium to Wolverine's skeleton between the decades that followed. So now we're going to talk about potentially Wolverine's greatest love interest ever. Sit down, Gene, we're not talking about you. No, we're talking about Mariko Yashida. We're also just going to hit the highlights of the Mariko Yashida / Wolverine story, because I don't want to deprive anyone of reading this really great saga, which reaches its culmination in the Chris Claremont, Frank Miller miniseries, and also Claremont, and begins in the Claremont X-Men run and ends right after the miniseries during the Claremont X-Men run. With that being said, let's get to it. Logan meets Mariko on a mission with the X-Men. The two have an instant attraction. Sometime later, Mariko would visit New York and they would begin a formal courtship. Now, sometime even further still, because Claremont had a habit of not instantly paying off storylines, due to the fact that people had longer attention spans back then, Logan would lose contact with Mariko. Now, this was before long-distance calling and the internet was much of a thing, so they obviously kept up correspondence through letters. He was not getting letters back. He travels to Japan to find out what's up. Mariko's father, Lord Shingen Yashida, who was head of the Yashida clan, had resurfaced after a mysterious absence. And Lord Shingen had forced Mariko to marry against her will an abusive man by the name of Nobuhiro Hideki. This was a marriage of convenience orchestrated by Shingen to increase the family's business ties and standing in Japan. Now, upon learning this, once arriving in Japan, Wolverine would run afoul of a organized crime group / death cult of undead ninjas, the Hand. More on them later, though. Now, the obstacle of Nobuhiro Hideki would later be removed by Logan's friend and, for all intents and purposes, rebound chick during this time, Yukio. Now, Logan had met Yukio after finding out that Mariko had been married against her will, and it's complicated, read the miniseries. So eventually, skipping over some details, so as not to spoil much, Wolverine would battle Lord Shingen in honorable combat and kill him. Thus, him and Mariko were free to be wed. However, that would be cut short. Sensing a theme here? As Mariko did not feel that she was worthy of wedding Wolverine until she had rid Clan Yashida of all organized crime ties. So her and Logan remained engaged. Now tragedy would strike as Mariko would be poisoned by hand leader Matsuo Suriyaba, who was trying to merge Clan Yashida with the Hand. When Wolverine found Mariko, the poison had already worked itself too far into her system for her to be cured. So to spare her the pain, he had to mercy kill her. Wolverine then vowed, in order to avenge Mariko, that he would return to find Matsuo every year on the anniversary of Mariko's death at the stroke of midnight to cut off one of his limbs. Again, this is a very complicated story. I've skipped a lot of details. Read the Frank Miller, Chris Claremont miniseries and key Chris Claremont X-Men, Uncanny X-Men issues. Now that we've focused on Wolverine's waifus and various love interests, let's switch gears to his heretofore unmentioned or briefly mentioned Japanese antagonists, not counting Ogun or Daken, who we've covered enough already. So we'll start with the Silver Samurai, or Kunichio Harada. Harada was the bastard son of Lord Shingen, and was always shunned by his father and denied his rightful place at the head of Clan Yoshida. Not only was Harada Shingen's bastard, but he was also a mutant. He would use his mutant power, which was the ability to control tachyon energy and channel it through his katana blade, which gave him the power to cut through almost any known substance. That is, except for Wolverine's claws, which, let me deviate for a moment. If you've watched any of the shitty Wolverine solo movies, most especially number 2, where for some reason Harada isn't the Silver Samurai, and it's instead Shingen in some sort of dime store retarded Iron Man mech, when he actually heats up his sword, doesn't use a mutant power, he's able to cut through Wolverine's claws. Which really pisses me off because it lets you know that the filmmakers had to have read the comic books, because this was a big moment in the comics, as when Wolverine and the Silver Samurai had their first fight, that was sort of the question. Could Silver Samurai's ability, using his sword, cut through Wolverine's adamantium claws? And the answer was no. So apparently, again, the filmmakers read those books and decided to go another way and shit all over that, and also mix 2 characters into one. But let me get off that, because I could shit on the X-Men movies all day. Now, Harada and Wolverine have most usually been at odds, but at times they've teamed up. Usually this is short-lived, involving some sort of truce or whatever. But one of the most notable team-ups is during the Wolverine Origins series. Wolverine, who has not used a katana in quite a while, seeks out Harada, makes a deal with him to help him knock the rust off his sword skills. Wolverine picks it back up way quicker than he expects to, and in fact even makes the comment that he continues to let Harada beat him during their sparring sessions just to save his pride. And if that doesn't read like some sort of Weeb fan fiction, I don't know what does. Next up, we've got Lady Deathstrike, or Yuriko Oyama. Yuriko Oyama was the daughter of a failed Japanese kamikaze pilot. How do you fail as a Japanese kamikaze pilot? You survive. But I digress. Lord Darkwind was her father's name. A lot of lords for some reason in Marvel Comics with these Japanese here. Don't quite understand why. Now, even though Darkwind was disgraced, Lord Darkwind was the one to develop the adamantium bonding process. Eventually his notes were stolen from him and would later be used by the Weapon X program to give Wolverine his adamantium skeleton and coat his claws in that same said metal. Now, where Lady Deathstrike and Wolverine fit into all this is, now Deathstrike was treated very harshly by her father due to his disgrace in the war, and he treated her very badly, even scarring her face as his face was scarred by the Japanese government. She eventually killed him in a fit of rage. She regretted these actions, and as atonement decided to hunt down all of those who had profited off of his work. Now, this led her to focus her rage, although misguided, onto Wolverine. Why is it misguided, you ask? Well, Wolverine had no say in the fact that the adamantium was bonded to his skeleton. However, again, she made Wolverine the object of her vengeance. The first time Deathstrike seeks out Wolverine, they fight. She is handily and soundly beaten. So much so that she seeks out the body shop, which I believe was the criminal base of the Reavers, and undergoes painful cybernetic enhancements, and has tangled with Wolverine several times since then in her undying quest for vengeance. Some of Deathstrike's powers include cybernetic enhancements, adamantium-tipped claws, and just all around looking like a botched makeover. Lastly, let's talk about the Hand, the undead ninja death cult. Wolverine is probably one of the Hand's greatest enemies. The only heroes in the Marvel Universe more hated by the Hand would be Elektra, who at one point has been a member of the Hand and leader of the Hand, and Daredevil. And if you've seen the Daredevil TV series or read the Frank Miller comics or most any Daredevil comic, you know what I'm talking about. But we're just going to talk about Wolverine's most important encounter with the Hand. That would be the time that Gorgon, a Japanese mutant villain with the power to turn people to stone when they stare into his eyes, like his namesake. So Gorgon, who in his own right was a great swordsman and martial artist, deposes the leadership of the Hand by murdering them and taking over the group. He then lures Wolverine to Japan. Wolverine takes the bait and is ambushed in Japan. Gorgon kills Wolverine, and the Hand puts them through their resurrection ritual, which they use to brainwash people and make them mindless hand soldiers. Some people willingly go through this process, but others, like Elektra, have been forced into this process. Now, a brainwashed agent of the Hand, Wolverine goes on a tear across the Marvel Universe, carrying out several high-level assassinations, so much so that S.H.I.E.L.D. and most of the rest of the world's heroes have to get involved. Eventually, they're able to undo Wolverine's programming, for lack of a better term, and Wolverine cuts his way through countless hand ninjas to face Gorgon. During the climactic battle with Gorgon, Wolverine tricks Gorgon into seeing his own reflection in Wolverine's adamantium claws. This then turns Gorgon to stone like so much Greek mythology. Get it? Gorgon. Whatever. For the whole story, check out Wolverine, Enemy of the State. Those are the highlights of Wolverine's Japanese connections, and they continue to grow like a demon's boner in a hentai film. But there's more to the character, like his time with Alpha Flight, his time in Weapon X, the time he met Ernest Hemingway, and much more. If you'd like another video on everyone's favorite cigar-chomping, beer-swilling, angry, stabby X-Men, let me know in the comments below. That's it for this video. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Sayonara, bubs.